Hello, my name is W.P. Swarzo, and I want to talk to you about trade in surplus areas. Over here on this graph, let's say we have the U.S. lumber industry making plywood planks. Right here we have the domestic situation. Here are builders in America at $16 per plank. No builders would be interested in lumber. They would use other materials. Our supply here, the supply curve, which is also domestic, is the American lumber industry. At $2 a plank or less, there's no American production for lumber. This triangle up here represents all the spending money that builders get away with. They're willing to pay up to $16, but instead they pay $9. So 15, 14, 13, all those extra monies on up to 700 units to 700 units is what builders are keeping. This lower right triangle represents discounts that the lumber industry is willing to concede, but they don't have to because of this $9 per board equilibrium price at 700 units. Okay, now let's say that Canada, with all those vast forests, can deliver boards to the U.S. at $4 a board. This would make for an enormous trade gain. And here's what would happen. First off, this polygon that looks like a dumpster would be lost by the American timber industry. The American lumber industry would lose this surplus. They would only sell this many planks at $4 a piece. They would have to match the Canadian price. Now I made these slopes to be -1 and +1. So if you look at this here, the difference between $4 and $2 is 2. So we would have the U.S. lumber industry going from making 700 boards to 200. So they would be the big losers of liberalization of this lumber market. But the big gain would be had by American users of plywood, because their consumer surplus would go from this small triangle that looks like a shark fin to this massive one here. And the big gain to the whole market would be this, what looks like a tent right here, this isosceles looking triangle. So in essence, we start out with this, with American lumber, or only buying American lumber. If we open it up to trade, we gain all of this. The U.S. lumber industry loses this, but American consumers, they get a polygon that looks like this. Now I'll give you this. Since the slopes of this have the same absolute value, this is a difference of 500. So will this. So we'll have 1,200 boards being purchased by American consumers. So the new consumer surplus will be bound by $16, $4, and out to 1,200 units here. Okay. All right. Let's say Mr. Trudeau and President Trump have a spat, and then Mr. Trump or President Trump slaps on a $2 tariff per board, per Canadian board. Then we would have to apply that there. Okay, so here's what happens. This is the world price, so I'll say price of world. If President Trump were to slap on a $2 tariff per board, the de facto world price would be this right here. It wouldn't be $4 a board, but it would be $6 a board. So we have P world plus $2 tariff, right? Okay. So what happens then? Well, two things happen. American consumers begin using less plywood, and American plywood suppliers have an opportunity to supply more. So if this is a difference of 2, so will this be right here. So now American lumber will be supplying not 200 boards domestically, but 400. And since this is symmetrical, we could have this go down to here. And now Americans are only buying 1,000 boards in this lumber market. American industry is making 400 boards and they're getting $6 a piece. So now the producer surplus rebounds from this very small triangle to this one right here. So now the producer surplus prime for American industry is bound by $2, $6, and 400 quantity. What do we have in the middle? Well, American industry would supply 400. The American consumer would buy 1,000. The difference would be 600 in imports from Canada. So we would have 600 in imports. And what I did not show you before was with open market, we would have had 1,000 in imports before the tariff is applied. Whether it's a tariff or a quota makes no difference to this graph. The tariff I will refer to as rents. Right there. So $2 per board times 600 boards, and 600 being the difference between 1,000 and 400, right? So imports right there. So we'd have 1,200 in rent, so that's 600 times 2. With the application of this tariff, the imports shrink and the domestic production increases a little, and the usage of this product also decreases. Now, if we look at the areas, and in the end, looking at the areas, this massive, what looks like a shark fin used to go to the American users of lumber, but now they're only getting this. So the consumer surplus prime is bound by $16, $6, and 1,000 Q. The American lumber industry gets a producer surplus, a new producer surplus, bound by $6, $2, and 400 Q. The rents are this rectangle right here, $2 times 600 units. And the inefficiency loss is represented by these two little triangles here that I'll fill in. Because the American consumer sees Canadian plywood being priced at 6 when it actually costs 4, that misinformation, that distortion causes inefficiency. So, the last thing I don't want to forget to say, if in the end President Trump said, I'm not going to have a $2 tariff, but what I will do is I will cap Canadian imports down to 600. Those who have the license to bring in the 600 Canadian planks would receive a rent of $2 per plank. So whether it's a quota or a tariff doesn't change what the graph looks like. So I hope this has shed some light on consumer and producer surplus areas and what trade restrictions do to them. Thanks for watching.